Двери, двери, премудростью вон мемом.
We're supposed to have a little epilogue here, and I'm very happy that you could come to the monastery with us and worship together with us today. It means a lot to have visitors. That St. John Chrysostom once said that a home that never has, you're supposed to take in the poor and not just throw food out the window to them. That if you didn't have the poor visiting your home, you didn't have a real home. And I remember a story where the French ambassador to Moscow before the revolution had been invited to a nobleman's house, and the meal was, everything was set, and they were waiting and waiting and waiting, and he asked one of the people, "What are we waiting for?" He said, "We're waiting for Christ." And so they waited. He was a little bit, thought that was strange. But pretty soon somebody knocked at the door, and the master of the house himself went and answered the door. And he brought in a couple of bums, people from the street, people who were living on the street, and seated one at the head of the table, one next to him. And he proceeded to wait on them, and he said, but when he brought the two beggars into the main room, he said, "Christ has arrived, now we can eat." And he seated them at the table and began to wait on them. You remember the story from St. Philaret the Merciful? Now, St. Philaret, was a very charitable person, very, very wealthy nobleman in Cappadocia. And there was a drought and famine and various things happened that he lost. Actually, everybody in that area became poor, and he as well. And he had left with a yoke of oxen, and he saw another farmer had only one ox, and his ox had died, so he unleashed one of his oxen and gave it to him. His wife was always very furious with him, but they're very well connected family. It's it's a historical incident because his daughter was chosen to marry the Sevastopol, the crown prince. So they, of course, moved to Constantinople, and they were placed in a very wealthy home. They were given all kinds of things, and he was never always worried about his sons. So he sat them all down one time, and he said, "The emperor is coming with his train for supper. And of course, it's the emperor and his family, so we have to wait on him ourselves." And pretty soon they came in, and he brought a bunch of what we would call street people in and sat them at the table. And the sons were rather upset. She said the emperor was coming. He says, "Oh, I meant the emperor of heaven and earth." Not the earthly emperor. And Jesus Christ is at the table. We have to wait on him. Yeah. So I always think of the Christ in the bread line when I hear that story.
It's a little bit like the story of the first deacon in the church in Rome, Lawrence, who was ordered by the imperial authorities to bring the treasure of the church and turn it over to the state. And the following day, he said, "I'll bring it tomorrow." And the following day, he brought a parade of the poor.
Yeah.
For which, of course, he paid with it.
It was different times. People had a sense of that. We were talking about peace as a peace fellowship. And we have to. Everybody's wondering, what can I do for world peace? Who are we so we can have any impact? But peace begins at home, of course. And we have. Sometimes I have people who come here at the end. We have a spiritual talk after the liturgy every Sunday. To go home and make a list of every person you think you hate, every person you're simply angry with, every kind or category of people you think you hate or you're prejudiced against, and then try to write a meaningful paragraph explaining why. It's very difficult to write a meaningful paragraph explaining why. I hate them because they're different. I hate them because I think God hates them. I hate them because Jerry Falwell said we should. There's all kinds of reasons that people give. But the minute we have that kind of disdain or judgment or something, we've already betrayed Christ. Because every person is the image and likeness of God. So it's a kind of iconoclasm to hate or judge or condemn another person. And we can always think of a reason why. But the most common reason why we hate somebody is because we see the reflection of ourselves in them. And that disturbs us a great deal. We hate most in others what we fear most in ourselves. And we, instead of having any humility and weakness, we project ourselves onto the other people. And what we're afraid of in ourselves makes us hate other people who are a reflection of us and who we were a reflection of. And that's one of the biggest spiritual catastrophes for us. We can always find a reason, we can always find an excuse to condemn or hate or look down on other people. The one thing we can never do is to see into the other person's soul. And the one thing we can never do is to share their sorrows and grief and the things that have crushed their spirit. But we can help crush their spirit further. We can put our foot on their head and shove them down deeper into the darkness. And if we're going to do that at home, how do we think we can influence the rest of the world in any way? We Christians are sometimes the meanest, nastiest, most cruel people on the face of the earth. And I hear Christians going around, whimpering now, oh, Christians are being persecuted someplace. I said, well, turnabout's fair play. When you have to wear somebody else's shoes, they sometimes pinch. We don't have a good record. We don't have a good record. We've been net persecutors in this world. Ever since the Edict of Milan, we started persecuting other people. And we do it perhaps even worse in our day than we did before, because at least people had some mercy and compassion before. We don't have compassion, sometimes we have pity, which is sort of cheap, tawdry. Pity's not worth having. When you pity somebody, you hurt them, you injure them, you wound them. It's like when you see people on the street, your first moral obligation is to validate their humanity. It's like, I hear smarmy, self-righteous people, moralists who don't know that moralism has no relationship to morality, talking about, when we had the mass murder of the prostitutes in Vancouver, and we said, we've got to legalize prostitution and give these people a safe place to work. Oh my God, no, it's immoral. And, some of those people who are screaming about it being immoral are the Johns. That's one of the things. We had 2 pastors caught picking up women in Abbotsford. So, but they were very moralistic about prostitution. Like the governor of New York was going to stamp out prostitution if elected, except for the really expensive ones that he spent state money on. See? It's just like the homophobic ministers in the States who are caught with boys or young men, or that one pastor who came back with the
Rent-a-boy.
The rent-a-boy, yeah. And they caught him at the airport. Very homophobic. Of course he was, because what we fear most in ourselves, we hate most in others. So show me somebody who hates prostitution, he's probably a John, if he's really virulent about it. Virulent homophobe, a self-hating homosexual. There are no exceptions. No exceptions. And this is the same thing. It's like people, I saw the first black person to actually complete the military academy, or the Naval Academy, I think it was, in the U.S., just died. He had about 16 predecessors who were drummed out of the academy because they were black. He was the only one who had courage enough to stick it out. Why do people feel threatened by it? Or what was it they were afraid of? What was it that we're afraid of? That's the whole thing. When you hate somebody or you want to condemn or persecute somebody, the first question to ask is, what is it I'm afraid of?
Yeah.
What is it I'm afraid of that makes me feel this way? Peace begins at home, and it begins in our own hearts, and it begins in our own parishes, and it begins amongst parishes. Most of our parishes think the other parish is competition, and they do, they move heaven and earth to try to keep any of their people from knowing there is another parish. So this is part of our sort of angst, that if we can't bring peace at home, we can't affect the world in any way, shape, or form. If we can't bring peace to our own hearts, we have nothing to offer the world anyway. It's better for us just to keep silent. You know, if we can't bring peace within ourselves, with our own hearts, and peace with the people around us, we have nothing to say to the world. And it's better just to shut up and say our prayers and struggle. That's, you know, otherwise we're just trying to show off with fancy words. And that's kind of self-idolatry in itself and all. So peace has to begin at home, and we have to make peace within ourselves and amongst ourselves. And, you know, any of you, well, none of you have been a priest anyway, but try to conduct a parish council meeting in a Serbian church someday and see, you know, where people, you know, fight each other. Choirs are a form of politics in the church. Parish councils are a form of politics in the church. And there's all kinds of unpeacefulness and disharmony in their own parishes.
And divide the people. Divide the people is right.
Eh?
Play politica says that church should divide the people.
Well, of course, yeah, you always find somebody who wants to divide and conquer, because the church is an avenue of political power for a lot of people. Not just that people say about ethnic people. No. Converts are worse. Believe me, converts are worse.
Yeah.
Much worse. They bring all this Protestant baggage with shepherding and guru cultism and all that in with them. And it makes everything worse. So don't look at the ethnic people. Everybody's a reflection of something. And yet we know very well that a lot of people go to the Greek church just so they can speak Greek and argue politics.
Yeah.
You know, we had atheists running for the parish council in the Serbian church because they didn't speak English very well. It was the only avenue to political power that they had. We've all had all of this, all of us. We can't excuse anybody. None of us. We're all guilty of it. We all bear the burden, and all of us. And you know, doesn't matter whether you're born. We say we're born in the faith. Nonsense. We have to sooner or later be converted, even if we're born. You know, we were born Serbs, so we think we're Orthodox. We're Orthodox when we accept Orthodoxy. We're Christians when we accept Christianity, really in our hearts. I mean, children are born with faith. They have to lose their faith. The children are born with faith. That's why we baptize them. And children are born without hate. Children are born without prejudice. Children are born without malice. They have to learn it all from us. We're the ones who teach it to them. So it behooves all of us, adults, especially those of us who have actually raised children. That includes Father Deacon Philip and I. So, it behooves us to take a good hard look at our children and see what sort of nasty little things we taught them as they were growing up, while we were trying to teach them something positive. To see how much hate or how much malice or how much prejudice or how much fear we instilled in them, and how much we crippled them spiritually and emotionally. And then take a look and say, well, what do I have to offer the rest of the world then? What do I have to say to the rest of the world? You know, I can say stuff that's, everybody has to get a dictionary to look it up to see what I'm saying, but it doesn't do any good unless we can start at home with peace. And I suppose that's the main thing, is a peace fellowship. If we're going to have a peace fellowship, let's see if we can at least have peace within the fellowship.
Here.
You know, that's an issue. You know. Don't look at other people as competitors. Don't look at the other parish as competitors. You know, we have parishes around here where they forbid the parishioners to come to the monastery because they think we're competitors. We're not competing with anybody. That's part of the angst of the Orthodox world, really. And it's something we all bear the burden for. So let's try to look at peace at home, peace amongst ourselves, peace within the fellowship, peace within the community, you know, peace within the church, within our near parishes and things. You know, when I was a kid, we used to go on procession to each other's church during the feast days. And we used to go to every other parish, every parish in the city. We would go to venerate the epitaph. And, you know, you would go Saturday. And actually, some of us who were younger, we used to know when the liturgy would finish for Pascha. And you could probably hit about 3 churches for something to eat. Because the Greeks in first, and then the Serbs, and then the Russians. So you could show up just in time for food, and every one of them tried really hard. And especially the Serbs will also have lots of liquor.
They wouldn't do bad with the Russians either.
Eh?
They wouldn't do bad with the Russians either.
Well, you know, we have a story about when the Russians came in exile to Belgrade, and they were all sitting Saturday night drinking, a bunch of Serbian priests and Russian priests. And one of the Serbian priests said, "Oh no, it's after midnight. We were still drinking after midnight. How can we serve the liturgy?" He said, "Don't worry, the Russian priest passed out under the table before midnight. He can serve." Anyway, I suppose as an epilogue, all I want to say is that if we don't have peace amongst ourselves, we got nothing to say to the rest of the world. You know, if we're afraid of each other, how are we going to tell the rest of the world not to have fear? You know, if we're afraid of other human beings in our own community, if we want to persecute other human beings in our own community, if we want to certify bullying and that sort of thing, what have we got to say to the rest of the world? You know, we're leaves blowing in the wind. We have nothing to say.
Vladik, I just would love to hear you though say a few words on the post-human, because that was sort of in the listing of what you might say at this point.
Yeah, that's right.
And I thought if you could tie
I
the
forgot
fear,
those.
yeah,
Nobody told me. I didn't know.
you could tie the fear into that though nicely. I
No,
think.
well, you know, actually, post-human, it's, you know, I was speaking at a conference in Moscow in February, a science and technology conference. I was there as a neurobiologist, actually. And I only have 3 years of neurobiology, but I was there as a neurobiologist. But anyway, the difficult thing about it was the veered more toward avatarism. And one reason, the American government had just recently announced that it had committed several $1 billion to avatar projects. Now, avatars are, how many of you know Star Trek? Any of you watch Star Trek?
Of course.
Yeah, they're cyborgs. What they're, you know, we are Borgs. Resistance is futile. What they're doing is creating Borgs. That you know, we've developed artificial intelligence to a very high degree. You know, I would say we had artificial intelligence for a long time. We call it Parliament. They call it. Or the states they call it George Bush. The Avatar project is to the degree that you have an avatar and the person sitting side by side, you can't tell which one's which. And one of the spreads of it, because the avatar operates from the brain waves of the person sitting next to it. Whatever he thinks the avatar does from his brain waves. They can read the brain very easily, you know. I mean, we have scans of the brain wiring, the difference in the brain wiring between different kinds of people. And we know what's hardwired and what's not hardwired in the brain. And we know what's malleable and what's not malleable. And you can control weapons with brainwaves. And you can aim the weapon by looking. You know, you can play computer games now with your eyes as well. You don't have to have a keyboard at all. Wherever your eyes are, when you fix your eyes and blink them, something happens. Yeah, but you can fire weapons that way too. And so the whole idea is to have more cyborgs. And why I say cyborgs? Because they got to the point now where there's a group of oligarchs at the conference. They paid for a good part of it, although those of us in the big history movement, Bill Gates paid for us to be there. But they are trying to develop a situation where they can download their own brain, into the board, into the avatar. And there were another group of them, a 31-year-old chap there who controls most of the communication systems in Moscow and Petersburg, extraordinarily wealthy. 31 years old, he's terrified of death. He wants to be immortal, so he wants to download his brain into an avatar. So, you know, I had a very technical paper. When I heard all these speeches, I just put it aside. Somebody's got to say something on it in behalf of humanity here.
Exactly.
So to ask everybody, what do you consider a human being to be? What do you consider to be personhood? You know, it's okay. Our essence is the common human nature, but we have a hypostasis. And what do you consider to be a person? And really, the answer is, you know, well, somebody who has self-awareness, aware of their own existence, Okay, we have a lot of computers that have self-awareness. You can actually think to a certain degree. We have avatar robots that know if a child approaches them and they bend over and speak to the child in child language. Or they recognize the child. And they recognize people that they know already and can greet them by name. So you have a very, very sophisticated development in this field. And so the thing is, they're talking about immortality. I said, you want immortality, say your prayers. If you could download some of the content, you can download the whole content of your brain. But if you could download some of the content of your brain, memories, of course, are what make you. So you know yourself through your memories, and by being able to place yourself within the memories and the context of it. You can download that, it's easy. You can isolate memories down into a single protein and transfer it even. But what you can never download a soul, and you can never download a conscience. So what we could end up doing is creating a whole army of psychopaths that have neither soul nor conscience. And it's quite possible. Today's science fiction is tomorrow's reality. Remember when Dick Tracy back in the 50s had a cell phone? Yeah, he had a wristwatch-sized cell phone. And everybody thought it was, total fantasy. But now you have wristwatch televisions. You can watch the Manchester United and Arsenal or something on your old cell phone, your wristwatches. It's incredible what we've done, but it's all there. I mean, cyborgism is not too far away.
And that's what you mean by post-human?
Well, post-human, because the thing is that we've come to a point now where you can consider a machine that has your memories to be human. So all the aspects that make us human. If we have a post-human, a concept of humanity that's post-human, because we don't recognize humanity for what it is. I mean, the human person, and we're to the point where we can manipulate and redesign humans. We can. Sometimes it's useful because we have these genetic situations you want to correct, like retinoblastoma or cystic fibrosis or something. And people always go around saying, "Oh, there's no gene for this, there's no gene for that." Of course not. There's no gene for anything. Gene equals protein. A person has cystic fibrosis not because of the cystic fibrosis gene, but because of the gene that's supposed to produce a protein. If it doesn't produce the protein, there's no intercellular pump to regulate the salinity of the cell. Because of the salinity of the cell is not regulated, you get mucus build up, and a person suffocates on their own mucus. Same with retinoblastoma, which only affects infants, like horrible eye cancer, because the suppressor cells are not clicked on by the epigenetic switch. The reason they're not is because there's too much protein being produced.
So nanotechnology can fill the space.
So nanotechnology can fix all. The nanotechnology can also alter you as a human being. So that this is sort of what we mean by post-human in a way, in that respect. Not just that we don't regard each other as humans. I mean, I served in a Tlingit Indian parish in Alaska for some time, and I served in Tlingit language. But the word Tlingit means the humans. Everybody else wasn't a human. Mm-hmm. Only the Tlingits. It turns out that that's what Aleut means too. So if you're Aleut, you're human. If you're not, you're not. You're not human. And in a way, we come kind of a cycle around like that. I mean, Jews are not humans. I'm going to chuck them in a gas chamber. These other people that I don't like, they're not really humans. God hates them anyway, so let's chuck them in a gas chamber. We have that. We have the capacity. Only humans have the capacity for real inhumanity. At least if another animal kills us, it's because it's hungry. If we kill it because of envy or jealousy or malice, or because somebody didn't pay their pusher and we got bumped. We don't kill for the same reason. We are capable of being inhuman, of having inhumanity. No other species is, and no other species cannibalizes itself as much as we do. We lose a regard for humanity when we lose our context of our relationship with God, with Christ, because really our relationship with Jesus Christ, I mean, the indwelling of the Holy Spirit within us, the image of God in man is what makes us human. Otherwise, as St. Seraphim of Sorrow said, if God hadn't breathed the Spirit into mankind, man would remain only the most clever of the animals. But we wouldn't be humans. It's the image and likeness of God in us that makes us humans. Otherwise, we didn't, if people say, oh, man didn't descend from apes. Of course not. Man is an ape. But we are, we're apes. What are you talking about? Of course we didn't descend from apes. We are apes. If God hadn't breathed the Spirit into us, we'd be just the most clever of animals. But we want to make it far more complex, but that's what it really boils down to. It's this image and likeness of God in man that makes us humans. And it's, we fall in the fallen nature as a loss of humanity to a degree. And Christ restores the humanity and makes us fully human again. Makes it possible for us to be fully human again. If we can just undercut and get rid of our own arrogance and self-righteousness and condescension toward others, other human beings. It's iconoclasm. The minute you condemn any other human being, it's iconoclasm. And, that's why peace has to begin at home. But in the post-human situation now, we think we can replace humans with machines. And one of our catastrophes of our technology, you go to a supermarket, it's much easier to go through the self-checkout, but you probably put 5 people out of work with it. So humans now are disposable. We really come to the point where humans are disposable entities. And they can be replaced by a machine or a robot, which will do it cheaper because you don't have to give it minimum wage. All you do is just oil the joints once in a while. So, when I was a student, I worked in an automobile assembly plant for a while with a welder. But before I was finished, we'd all been replaced by robots who did the spot welding. So everybody who was a spot welder was out of a job. So this is a certain degree to whatever will increase the profits of a major corporation makes human beings disposable. The only reason, your highest patriotic duty is to consume. And since we're disposable, you think, well, how many of us can they dispose of, and there's still somebody to consume stuff? But it's really the idea that we can all be replaced by machines. And so there is a low regard for humanity itself.
So I'd like to hear you then add some thoughts then about how there has to be maybe some more discussion about limits.
About limits?
Or boundaries. I mean, the
Yeah.
post-human won't have the same dynamic with a boundary that our the mystery of the way in which our jealousies and our envy kept us within a certain bound.
Yeah.
It kept us in the human-inhuman category.
Yeah.
Whereas if you go into the post-human, you can clean up all this untidy stuff and
Well, you think you can.
where you think you can, but I mean the idea is
I read masses of research papers every week, actually, particularly in neurobiology. And I have a lot of colleagues, and even in Iran, we have a few people are contributing. And we look at all of these subjects, and people are planning how they can reshape the human brain externally, how it can rework the human brain. But the fact is, you can read another person's thoughts. Right now, you need a machine up close. But before long, you can read each other's thoughts from the other room. To actually do that. It's kind of like, these people were they formed cults about barcodes once upon a time. Barcodes were there in the 1950s. Most people don't realize it because they were on the side of boxcars. That's how they tracked boxcars and put all the yard clerks out of work. But microchips were always coming down the line somewhere. We discussed this at UBC in the 1960s, early 1960s, microchips. But they tell us now we don't need a passport to go to the States and we'll have this microchip in our driving license. They can read it without you getting out of the car. So can any criminal organization read it without you getting out of the car. All of your details are in the microchip. Anybody with a little bit of technology can read that microchip. And it doesn't take. People have microchips now in some places in their thumb. They can go through the airports and things like that easier. And it has every detail we want it. Anybody with a little technology can read the thing. So, it's not, but we're willing to give up freedom and peace for the sake of convenience. It's not about peace and safety, it's about convenience. We're willing to give up all of our privacy and all of our humanity for convenience. And that's part of it. But when we look at what was being planned, see, neurobiology has been hijacked by the military, in a way. And most of the big research grants in neuroscience today come from the military in various countries. And they come from it. There are two projects. The United States has one and China has one. They're trying to devise a way to interfere with the electrical processes in the brains. And then the person can't do anything. They can't think or act. And you can do this, well, to an enemy army or something, or to people who are doing a legitimate, constitutionally correct civil protest. It's like the heat machines now. We've got a device that will project heat outward to a whole crowd of people. It wasn't developed for war, it was developed to control domestic protesters. And the heat reaches a certain point, people have to flee from it. They can't tolerate it anymore. This is for domestic protesters. For legitimate people who are legitimately protesting within their own country. But the idea of scattering people's brain, electric movements of people's brains and things like that, is being very well developed already. So, to be used in warfare, but be used elsewhere too. So a lot of the advances, so to speak, in neuroscience now, all have military applications. The entire conference in Moscow, everything there had a military application. One or two things had an application in medicine. The rest were all had military applications. And this is, of course, post-human. You want genetically modified organisms, but you also want genetically modified human beings. You can't.
So this is crossing a boundary, isn't it? Isn't this going?
Well, but the thing is that regulating it is very difficult because it's the military establishment in most countries that are sponsoring it. So who's going to regulate it? That's the whole issue that we come up with in these bioethical questions. It's all well and good to restrict doctors from doing anything, but you don't restrict the military from doing it. And if one country's doing it, they all have to do it, of course. The United States is spending billions of dollars on re-engineering the human person.
So what is the Christian response? I mean, this is basically imitation. This is a mimetic engine for the apocalypse or something.
Well, of course, just,
we need to be non-participatory.
I wouldn't want to get hysterical like the barcode people did.
Yeah.
But with, I think microchips, there's no place you can be on the face of the earth that somebody doesn't know exactly where you are at any time and every time. At all. And, or your entire physical record. Or, your taxation record, all of it, on a microchip. So, of course, it's eschatological in it. We sometimes people we have a cult of the apocalypse. Everybody's worried about the end of the earth, and everybody's got prophecies about the end of the earth. And, I even get people to walk up strangers and come and say, "Oh, you're a priest, you're Orthodox, Well, when do you think the end of the world's coming?" When it gets here, you'll know. What else can I say? When it gets here, you'll know. But the very fact that we're willing to give up all of our privacy, and even to give up the civil rights, or normal liberties, for a mythology of peace and safety, but mostly for convenience. I mean, you don't get your irises read because you're safer that way. You get your irises read so you don't have to line up to show your passport when you get off the airplane. It's all for convenience. But you give up all of these things that protect your personhood.
So would you say that Christ on the cross is? Would you say something like Christ on the cross is what reveals even this incredibly new myth that's being created in the post-human.
Well, in the Garden of Gethsemane, Christ suffered infinitely more than he did on the cross. Because in the Garden of Gethsemane, as St. Irenaeus of Lyon said, that's where he took upon him the burden of all mankind. And the grief he felt over the condition of mankind was far more. That's what the sweating of blood and the chalice that he has to have removed from him, So his moral grief over the condition of mankind. But that wasn't enough. You have to see him suffer physically, because suffering humanizes us.
Well, the crowd. I was thinking the crowd is sort of the crowd is the type of the myth,
Yeah,
and so he's in relationship to the myth.
yeah, the mythos. But that's what, even how the Greeks responded to the earthquake in Constantinople, when they actually were on the verge of war. But as soon as the ordinary Turkish people started to suffer, they opened their hearts and they responded. And the Turks responded in kind when the Greeks started to suffer. Now, David Goa and I were and the late Heiko Schripper were in Constantinople, Istanbul one time, against the law, they call it Constantinople there, for a conference. And we asked the concierge in the hotel where they put us if it was possible to fly to Thessaloniki, because I had a lot of friends I wanted to fly over. He says, the only kind of aircraft we want to send to Greece is a bomber. But when the Greeks started suffering, the Turks responded and came to help them. So suffering helped to humanize us. And it's necessary for us to see Christ on the cross and to realize that in a proper Orthodox icon, the sign on the cross says King of Glory, it doesn't say King of the Jews. Because we saw Christ come in his glory when he was nailed to the cross. Because the glory of God is his co-suffering love for mankind. The glory of God is the fact that God is meek and humble and lowly of spirit, and that he had co-suffering love for mankind. But seeing the suffering of Christ helps to humanize us and helps to realize, and to call us to the highest possible vocation of the Christian is co-suffering love. The purpose and meaning of life is to love and be loved. There isn't anything else, that's it. The purpose and meaning of life is to love and be loved. There isn't anything else.
Would like to know about Cosmas Tolos about 300 years ago. Cosmas Tolos. Some way that God gave the light to the monk to write to us, and we're the last people we see the truth, what Cosmas Tolos told to us 300 years ago about the machineries, speak up to us, coming more smart to us, and take over our complete, other computers, Plus talk about the small box in your hand, you can speak up between Moscow to London, from London to Paris, from Paris to Athens, from Athens to Washington. It's small box. And people see you, you see the people see you now. 300 years later, we are now here. Why did God give to the Cosmas Tolos the light to give to us the information 300 years ahead?
Well, Cosmas Tolos also predicted television and satellite broadcasts. So, remember he said that in the last days, the hordes of Antichrist will spout from the tiles of every roof, and everyone will have a talking icon in his home. And the devil he said the devil will orbit the earth with his pumpkins. And by that means he can sit in the temple in Jerusalem and speak to the Lord. But the rest of the story is interesting, because in the Turkish times, they didn't allow the raya to be the cattle. That was us. Our ancestors were cattle. The Greeks and Serbs and Romanians. They weren't allowed to be educated, and very often the church was gone, or they turned it into a jami, and so it was used for Muslim worship. So a lot of the monks would slip out of the monasteries, and they would carry on the backpack everything they needed to serve the divine service, sort of like Bishop Yossoff used to do in northern Alberta. Cosmas Tolos, he carried everything with him, and on the cheese fair and meat fair Sunday, in the Orthodox in Matins, we read the prophecies about Antichrist on both those Sundays. It says that Antichrist would sit in the rebuilt temple of Jerusalem and demonize the whole world. And somebody asked him, says, Father, how could he sit just in the temple and speak to the whole world? That's when St. Cosmas Tolos said, I saw and I beheld in the Spirit that in those days the horns of Antichrist would sprout from the tiles of every roof, and everybody will have a talking icon in their home, and the devil will orbit the earth with his pumpkins. And by this means he'll speak to the whole world at one time from the temple.
I sat
in
in
Jerusalem. But I mean, more interesting to me is how the monks used to sneak out and they would find one intelligent person in the village and they would teach them to read and write and say, now it's your obligation to teach everybody else to do it. We had a lot of New Testament prophets.
Forgive the question. This is sort of an epilogue to your epilogue. And personally, I could sit here and engage in conversation on this subject for a very long time, but we've gotten out of context. So make application for us if you can. What does this post-human idea and what does some of this stuff that you're talking about with technology, how is that relevant to us? Make application for us as a peace fellowship, as an Orthodox peace fellowship, so that it's meaningful to us in our application.
I think in part because we have to ourselves decide what it is to be human and what it is to be a person. And that we have to really be teaching that, and that we have to really try to practice that as well, but to teach it. And when we talk post-human, one of the things that makes post-human ideology work is when we don't have regard for other human beings ourselves, when we don't have regard for others. There's always somebody we would like to see rebuilt. We always have somebody we'd like to point to and say, why don't they get inside their head and change it? And to a certain degree, we're probably prepared to allow that to happen. And that's the thing we have to, we have to embrace everybody else as they are and accept them as they are. God doesn't hate anyone. We project our own hatred onto God and reinterpret God, which is a great deal of what was happening in the Old Testament. There was a projection of the people who were writing about God on it. That's why St. Anthony the Great says that anybody who takes the anthropomorphisms about God in the Old Testament literally or seriously doesn't know God. Knows nothing about God. So this is what we do project. And we at Orthodox Peace Fellowship, part of it isn't just working for world peace, it's working for humanity. And we ourselves have to understand what we mean by humanity and personhood. And we have to embrace and accept everybody just as they are, not as we wish they were. And not because we're afraid of them and we want them changed.
I think somebody with your background can help us understand how a lot of the technology that we see as being harnessed in service to humanity. Now, I understand, and that's an interesting conversation in itself, that most of this technology is developed by the military first, and then finds application later in useful, productive society. So, but a lot of us are tempted, I wouldn't even put it in terms of temptation, a lot of us look at technology as something that can be harnessed in service to humanity.
Yeah.
And you're talking about this, and I think about this too, so others do too. I mean, I'm not the only one in the room that's interested in this. But you're suggesting that technology itself poses a significant danger to humanity, and that so what would you say to us? How would you warn us about that? I mean, how would you say to me, Peter, your interest in that technology is fine, but it's actually dangerous, and here's why.
Well, I mean, technology is mute. Technocrats, the people who work with it, they're the danger. But one of the problems is that we begin even before technology. Every time you want to have a war with somebody, you dehumanize the others. And there's a whole series of processes by which you dehumanize. And I was saying earlier, when I was a kid in the First World War, we had to see the propaganda movies about how to tell a dirty Jap from our Chinese friends. And Japs were, of course, very human. They shuffled when they walked, they looked at the ground, they did all these foaming bows, and they wouldn't give you a bold handshake or look you directly. But our Chinese friends walk boldly, and they look you directly in the eye when they speak, and they'll shake their hand boldly. But Japs, as monkeys, just one step up from monkeys. And then, of course, the Nazi too wanted to be able to tell a dirty chink from our Japanese friends. But those are dehumanizing was there before technology. You could always dehumanize other people. And sometimes we dehumanize other people who are like ourselves, so we don't have to face the reality about ourselves. That's a part of it. It's a way of lying to ourselves. But then we permit the re-engineering of the human brain. And first of all, as a fellowship, peace fellowship, we're supposed to be a group, an activist group with that. We have to keep on top of these issues as well and realize technology is sometimes a parasite on science.
One more follow-up question,
Go ahead.
please. The opposite danger then becomes for us to externalize the evil and say it's technology, when it's not.
We don't become, what were they,
Yeah, the line of evil doesn't run through my computer, it runs through my own heart.
the line of computer, no, it's the pop-ups, that's where the evil comes from. I mean, you know, one of the biggest marital problems we have to deal with now, we have quite a number of Protestants that come here too, you know, with problems. And, you know, men will get hooked on internet pornography very quickly, women not so much. The women won't watch pornography unless it's a story.
Or it gets their
It
husband
has to be
involved.
exploring the inner workings of the person. Well, they don't want to see it. But men, you know, it's sort of like when, you know, when there's a marital problem and you have to try to teach a man how to have sex with his wife properly because women want to float in on a cloud and they want to dive in like a swimming pool. It's sort of the same with pornography. You know, women want something that sweeps them along in a cloud, and men just want to see somebody. You know, but the pop-ups are very often what gets the person started on the computer. I mean, how many people tell me, well, there was this pop-up and I was just curious, so I went to it, and the first thing I know, I was hooked.
The next thing I knew, my computer had crashed.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, your wife was standing with an axe. But you know, the thing is that the computer's fine. I mean, it's great because I have people that go to confession on Skype. You know, I have a couple of people who go to confession with me from Riga, Latvia. They do it by Skype. A couple of families in Virginia, and it's all done by Skype. But at the same time, you know, I've had so many men come. They got hooked on pornography because of a pop-up on the computer, and they were just curious for it. And then from there to there. And I mean, people have to take seriously their temptations from the devil too. You know, temptations aren't all. There's somebody whispering in our ears sometimes. But we have enough demons in the R complex of our brain to get us through life without any external demons. And but we do like to, you know, looking for cures for mental illness, for example. People start talking about re-engineering the brain. But when they start talking about re-engineering the brain for a positive purpose, how do you stop them from going beyond that?
Well, it's always a family response.
I mean, why do we have to have cloned re-engineered mice, for example? But we do. You know, we got goats now that from which you can get the protein for spider webs because it's very valuable. It's very strong. What have they done? They've taken genes from a spider and put them into the goats. Well, they put them into the female eggs. You know, most of us don't. We come from eggs, by the way. If somebody asks you what came first, the chicken or the egg, we all come from eggs. They've actually engineered a goat that can produce spider protein so they can spin it onto a spool. And this is the University of Utah, by the way. It wasn't some mad professor somewhere. But why do we need to do that, you know, somewhere? Because we're to re-engineer life itself. I mean, this is the whole root. Re-engineering humans, okay, but the re-engineering life itself.
Yeah.
And changing it for something that is not shouldn't be doing. But to re-engineer the human brain, that's how do we set limits on that? But we have to be in a post-human era to even think of re-engineering the human brain. We have no regard for humanity and the human person. And we've really come to that point in technology.
Have you read Jacques Ellul's book on technology? Jacques Ellul, is that?
Yeah, they do, yeah.
In his book on technology?
I've read everything about it. But, it's a tragedy for us. But okay, as an Orthodox Peace Fellowship, it's something we should be aware of. We need to have regard for humanity ourselves. But we don't always have regard for humanity. And I mean, you can look around to any place and see it. And David Goa had our friend Steve Bynum up from Chicago. He's producer for National Public Radio. And he's an ex-football player for Notre Dame. He's a black fellow. And we're talking about what the real opposition to Obama is in the States. Of course, it's because he's black. It doesn't matter what he does, he's black.
And a foreigner and a socialist.
But you know, Steve was telling us the enormous difficulty they still have, even after all the liberation movements and all these things through the 60s, they still have great difficulties in society, in white society, because Caucasians are afraid of black people. They're afraid. They have a deep fear. And what the deep fear turns out to be is they're afraid that black people might be superior. No, I'm not joking. I'm not joking. Yeah, that's really true. That they're afraid that black people might be superior in some ways. And that's what they're afraid of, really. You know, it's like homophobic people. They're afraid. And they won't embrace the humanity of another human being. They want them re-engineered. They want those human beings to be re-engineered. We can maybe change their brains electronically, or we can change their brains with magnetism, or we can rewire the brain somehow. I don't know what we do with black people. I guess Javex, I don't know. But it's true that we still have these prejudices in our society after all this time. And we as a Peace Fellowship need to counter those prejudices and undo them and not have them ourselves, and have some regard for humanity. We need to be doing conferences about humanity and what it means to be human, as well as to know what's going on in the Middle East.
Do you have time to plan that one?
Hey?
Do you have time to plan that one?
Well, we can plan one. No, we can plan it right there. I can get all the food to it. All I got to do is tell the Greeks and Romanians we need food.
Well, I'd like to suggest that it's not just a fear that someone else is superior, but sometimes a fear that no one else is inferior.
Yeah.
That is, you know, people feel a certain security knowing that they're better than someone.
Oh, yeah.
And it doesn't much matter who it is. It could be the Jews, it could be the blacks, it could be, you know, disabled, it could be foreigners, you know, as long as someone's below me.
Yeah.
And that sort of brings me to the idea that we find in Orthodoxy when we say in our prayers, you know, I'm sinners of whom I am the chief one. Mm-hmm. And it seems to me, if one gets to the point where you can sincerely feel yourself, at least in some respects, at the bottom of the heap, and come to terms with that, then you go a long way towards getting out of those dynamics where it has to be one-upsmanship.
Yeah, well, that's part of prejudice too. You know, you have to find somebody who's somehow lower than you. I mean, I don't know what all of you are going to do when you get to Heavenly Kingdom and find out that Serbian is the only language spoken there. I mean, where were the Greeks?
Learn Serbian, I
Where were
guess.
the Greeks if we didn't give them an alphabet? I mean,
I'll find that I'll be able to continue my vocation as an English teacher.
it's true, you know, you always, people are looking so hard because we lie to ourselves about ourselves so much. And we always look for somebody who's inferior to us so we feel better about ourselves. And we always make up excuses why the Chinese kids make higher grades in Vancouver than we do, than the white kids. And of course, all you have to do is go home and see that their parents make them study harder. They asked a little Chinese girl on television one time, the Chinese kids are so much higher than the Caucasian kids in the scores. And they asked her, do you think that Chinese people are smarter than white people? She says, no, we just work harder.
The technology is good for every day in our life. It's the more danger for children. The education with technology to our schools.
Yeah.
And what the technology bring to the kids, 5, 6, 7 years old kids, and make the kids to coming up, depends what the technology given to the children. And I worry that technology today with the internet, with our children and our grandchildren, is very dangerous. How to protect our children and our grandchildren, especially for the Orthodox people.
Yeah.
It's very dangerous. That kids grow up with that technology.
Yeah.
I think for myself, very dangerous. We grow up in Greece, and we see all people, and we give me a chair in a bus, we talk good day, good morning, now you drive your car, young kids come behind you, and put your finger to you, or talk to you, F. In television, F, every movie, F. How we can protect our children? That's what
Well,
with that technology.
you know, well, you don't know why you can't, but you know, you could bring a whole country down now by shutting
it's
the
very
electricity
hard.
off. That's all you have to do is pull the plug on the electricity,
Yeah.
but everything collapses. You know? Yeah, that's why we have bombs, you know, that will interfere with everything that runs by electricity or electronics.
Yeah.
Won't destroy buildings, won't kill people, it just shuts down the electrical grid, because everybody's crippled. That's why. We can't go on and talking about it.
Yeah.
It's kind of forever in a way, but, yeah, first of all, you know, parents don't, I mean, kids raise themselves.
That's the problem.
Most kids are raised in the shopping mall by other teenagers, by other kids. That's part of it. And the other thing is, that, let's just face it, it's, however horrifying it is for people to hear it, consumer capitalism is worse than communism spiritually. Because in the communist state, you knew who the enemy was. But in a consumer capitalist society, you can't identify the enemy.
Yes,
So
so
it's very subtle and very slippery.
it's a better myth.
Eh?
It's a better myth.
Yeah, it's a better myth.
You will
No,
be
like
happy.
communism was so crude, you know, and everybody knew they were awful people. But consumer capitalism gives you all kinds of benefits and stuff. And, you know. But when we teach morality, too, that's another problem, you know, the difference between morality and moralism. We have this conference in Magnitogorsk in Russia on rebuilding the educational system. And we're talking about the moral problems of youth. And I always have to say something about these moral problems and how we should approach teaching morality. And I just said, I'll beg you, I'll put my head to the floor in prostration and beg you not to start with sex. Because first of all, nobody's going to know what you're talking about, and secondly, they're not going to pay any attention to you. You know, because we have this neurotic attitude toward human sexuality and sex. Tell them something they can recognize as immoral. Like what we're doing to like the ecological catastrophe and what we're doing to our biosphere. Young people can understand the morality of something that can destroy all of humanity, that immediately is harming everyone. You know, those are the moral issues that we need to be worried about. Not, you know, saying God hates this person, God hates that, God hates the other. You know, that's nonsense. The problem is that in consumer capitalism, we don't care whether our grandchildren have a soil to stand on or air to breathe. We simply don't care about our children and grandchildren and great-grandchildren. We don't care if they starve to death. We don't care if they don't have fresh water. We don't care if they don't have a proper place to live. We don't care if they have air to breathe. We don't care about our grandchildren and great-grandchildren. We're probably the first generation from the 40s onward that absolutely do not care about the lives of our grandchildren and whether they have the possibility to survive. That's a moral issue. Now, all this petty nonsense that we worry about, that's idolatry, that's self-worship. This is the major moral problem in our world. Because I tell you, when we've been working in Syria and these other places, it's so obvious that there has to be a war over water. You know, not over land and territory, there has to be a war over water. That water would be more valuable than oil in it. And that's, this is the moral issue. And we're worried about, you know, it's so often we present God as if he was a nasty old curmudgeon sitting on the outer rim of the universe with a bunch of fetishes, and he violates one of his fetishes and so nobody down with a big fly swatter to catch your head in or something. And this is the way we picture God. So small wonder younger generation become atheists. Christianity is the mother of atheism in our world. And it's interesting that Dostoevsky one time said that Protestantism leads inexorably to atheism, and Roman Catholicism leads inexorably to imperialism. And as Metropolitan Anthony said, well, they don't pay attention to the Orthodox Church because it sounds like a grumpy old mother, you know, scolding people. But this is the whole thing that we force younger generation very often to say. That's, you know, I was speaking at Oxford University, you know, a few weeks ago, and then in the evening we have an open session for anybody wanting to come, mostly for Orthodox people. And the theme of it was Christianity as the principal cause of modern atheism. And so we had to discuss why Christianity is the principal cause of modern atheism. You know, creation science is one of the principal reasons. You know, I mean, a 6-year-old kid can name every species of dinosaurs, and you're going to tell them that, you know, the Earth's 10,000 years old. You know, I mean, I keep trying to remind people that the Flintstones was not a documentary. But, somehow they don't buy it. You know, Cain galloped away into the land of Nod riding a dinosaur. But what you tell young people is that you have to choose between truth and God, but you can't have both. You can't have God and truth. You have to choose between God and truth. You can't be a real Orthodox Christian if you don't believe something is absolutely false. You know, never mind the fact that the flood of Noah was supposed to take place 200 years after the building of the Great Pyramid of Giza. And that on that chronology, Adam would have died during the reign of King Narmer in Egypt. So, and you tell people these things. And then we come out with our neuroses and blame God for them. And we never touch what's actually, what the essence of morality actually is. You know, you can fulfill the 10 Commandments so you won't get punished. It has no moral value at all. That's self-serving. That's just the law of self-preservation. If you don't kill because you love your brother too much to kill him, if you don't steal because you love your brother too much to hurt him, if you don't, you know, the last and longest of the commandments is have empathy for your neighbor. Instead of envying your neighbor, have empathy for your neighbor. That's what the 10th commandment actually says. And, you know, how are you not going to envy your neighbor if you don't really care about him, you don't love him? You know, okay, you got a new car, instead of saying, wish I had one. So, why don't we rejoice for him because he could get a new car? That's the problem, you see, that we think obeying the law has some moral value. It has no moral value at all if we're obeying the law so we won't get punished. It's not, you know, we don't have a God avoidance technique here. I mean, a hell avoidance technique. The faith isn't a hell avoidance tool. It's to come into contact with the glory and the love of our Lord Jesus Christ.
We used to call it fire insurance.
Hey?
We used to call it fire insurance.
So, but the, you know, this movie was just made about Hellbound. And bound cause a lot of trouble. There is no heaven, no hell right now. Heaven and hell don't exist till the second coming. They read the same Mark of Ephesus as a response to the cardinals at the Council of Florence. Nobody can be in hell for the second coming. You can't be in heaven or hell without your body. Mm-hmm. You know, every father that wrote against the Manichaeans told us that. Well, but anyway, this is the whole thing. The church is not here to send us to heaven or to hell. The church is here to prepare us for our encounter with the glory and love of God. That's what the church is here for. And everything we do in the divine liturgy is eschatological. So, and okay, let's get back to the peace fellowship though. Is the appreciation of what it is that actually makes us human and what it is that lifts us up toward being true humans. We're true humans through Jesus Christ. Otherwise, we're human, but not human like Adam and Eve were. Where our Lord Jesus Christ and the indwelling of the Holy Spirit makes us true humans. And we have to discuss amongst ourselves, how do we understand humanity in person? And that part of peacemaking is that. You know, the Palestinians aren't really humans to the Zionists. They're disposable people. And consequently, the response can be that the Palestinians think that the Jews are just beasts but not really humans. You can't kill somebody else that you identify as being the image and likeness of God and an equal human with you. And that's part of what the Peace Fellowship means, to develop that and teach it and proclaim it.
We're talking about the theme for the next Orthodox Peace Fellowship Conference.
Yeah.
One of the ideas is to talk about church and state. You have proposed a theme that might be being human or becoming human. If we did the latter, what would be some of the elements of such a conference?
Well, the first thing we'd have to do is ask people, how do we understand humanity? And so what is a human person? I mean, from an Orthodox point of view, it's neither a soul without a body nor a body without a soul. But it's somebody, we have one universal essence of all humanity. We're all the same essence. And we're all one. But we have an individual hypostasis, and what we do with that hypostasis is of great significance, because that's something added to us by grace. That we have individuality, we have personhood. But what do we understand as personhood? I really think that focusing on what personhood means and how we understand personhood itself, how we understand our unique hypostasis.
It's been a major topic of Orthodox theology for the last 100 years, so it's
Well,
something.
I'd say almost the last 2,000 years.
Well, maybe 2,000. Almost.
Yeah,
It's been a
You know,
very major-
the greatest of all existentialists, Gregory Palamas.
Okay, I stand.
Dealt with that, you know. But we ought to remember that Orthodox Christian theology is existential. It's not scholastic. It's an existential theology. And, you know, it's no good to know if you don't do. And when St. Anthony Kropotwicki, you know, was writing his moral idea of the main dogmas of the faith, the refutation of Immanuel Kant, actually, that there are very few dogmas in the Orthodox Church. There's a whole bunch of stuff you can believe anything you want about. But the dogmas of the faith, unless they were the underpinning for our daily moral struggle, for our daily lives, moral lives, they would be of no value. But because they're the underpinning for our moral struggle, our daily moral lives, we ought to understand them and what they actually mean. And how they would help shape, as an Orthodox Christian concept of personhood, and what our actual moral struggle is to understand how the dogmas of the faith are the underpinning for our daily moral struggle. You know, how the Holy Trinity, for example, which is actually a metaphor for a relationship, as St. Gregory of Nyssa says, because there is another world, there are three things that are three hypostases are united in the bond of the essence of God. And in spite of all of the, you know, and that's of course what the church, now we have the dogma of the church, which is supposed to unite us together, and several hypostases into one bond of love. Because that's the last thing that we do in most of our churches. It's very particular that all of the choreography is done properly, but not so particular about what the words of the prayers mean. And so I really think that what we would first of all have to, what is personhood, and how do we as Orthodox Christians understand personhood itself? I mean, the fact that we're all part of the same human essence, that's very significant, that's important. That's part of what makes us human, is because we can be conscious of being a part of the greater whole. And other animals I don't really think are conscious, you know, of foxhood or bearhood or something like that. And they're just staking out their territory, the way our parish priest do, you know. But this is this idea of personhood and what it means to be the fallen human nature. I mean, the fall of mankind was a fall into a relationship of unselfish love, into a false image of ourselves. But it was also a fall into egotism and self-love and self-centeredness, which made us less than human. And every problem that ever faces mankind or humanity at large stems from egotism, self-centeredness, and self-love. All human problems stem from that. Well, but fear is the essence of that too. And the fact that, you know, Satan always offers us a counterfeit of something God's already given us. And we take the counterfeit because it's prettier. But it's a counterfeit. And it won't buy anything. So, but to take a good hard look at our humanity, what it is to be human, how the fall transformed us into being less than human, how our Lord Jesus Christ redeems us and makes us human again. And it even involves what does redemption actually consist in? The saving us from bondage. You know, the atonement theory always mystifies me because they never tell us what it is that we're redeemed from. It kind of indicates that Christ died to save us from God, you know. But man was all his lifetime held in bondage by fear. I mean, the fear of death, but fear. And fear is what we're redeemed from. That's why John tells us if we still have fear, we haven't learned how to love. But fear is what we're being redeemed from, and in particular the fear of death. And that part of reshaping us as human beings, because our mortality is not the problem. We were created mortal because only God could be immortal. We can become immortal by grace, but the separation from grace brings us down so that we can experience death. But our mortality is a treasure because our mortality reminds us of who and what we are and what our relationship with God is. And it's what makes us truly human is really the indwelling of the Holy Spirit, the work of Jesus Christ, the fact that Jesus Christ took our... That's why in the resurrection icon, Christ is shown raising Adam and Eve. Not specifically Adam and Eve, but because they're tied to the whole fallen human nature. So he's raising the whole fallen human nature in the icon. That's when we're returned to our full humanity, when Christ raises us up out of our state and condition. And if we think about it, all of the fasting, all of the prayer, I mean, of course, sincerity was hard, told us all these things are for the acquisition of the indwelling of the Holy Spirit. But all of it is part of the healing of the human nature. All these are medications that are applied to the healing of the fallen human nature. And our asceticism and our struggle is not just so we have rules and regulations and laws to follow. And so we learn enough self-control and self-control. Not somebody else controlling you, not some parish priest or some magic elder or somebody controlling and manipulating us. So we have self-control and self-discipline. So that, which is necessary for the healing of the fallen human nature, because self-discipline and self-control over our desires and appetites, so that we can be in control instead of being controlled. And it's part of the healing of the fallen human nature. You know, so all of it. So what is what do we consider the human person to actually be? That would be a very good thing. I mean, religion and politics is a very dangerous thing. Part of what crippled the Orthodox Church for so long was being a state church. An extremely negative impact on the faith and on the faithful. The Tsars persecuted the Orthodox Church too, you know.
From Peter the Great,
From
even
Peter the Great, well,
Ivan the
Peter
Terrible.
onward. But I mean, you know, snuffing out the Metropolitan of Moscow in Ivan the Terrible's time was a little bit sort of anti-church too. You know, Skorotov wasn't the one who got canonized after all. But there's always been this tension between the church and the state.
That's why I think that's what made us think of church and state as another worthy topic.
You know, if you dance with Caesar, Caesar always leads. That's right.
I'd actually like to present Jim's question as a little bit of a thought problem for all of us, and because one of the things that Alex and Jim and I are talking about is how to, how to grow the OPF, and that means different things, and I won't go into that now, but part of what it means is to solicit input and include other people. And so it's not just numbers of membership, but actually involvement and more integration of the membership with one another, with whatever means we can. So if I were to present his question as a thought problem, I would ask you, but everybody else as well, that we sort of think about his question. If we were to have a conference on the theme, what does it mean to be human, and we take your extemporaneous talk right there for 5 minutes about what you think that means as a sort of development of a theme, maybe we could think about it a little bit, and anybody is invited, that if you have thoughts on that and can say, well, this, and this would be great modules, and this would be a great practical application of that, because it can't just be theology and theory. And then submit that to us. And we could follow up on it. And I mean, one of the things that we're thinking about too, is sort of more than one conference a year, but sort of regional conferences, smaller but more accessible to people. And we could have more than one theme in a year. So input is welcome, and then we can go from there.
Yeah, and part of it is what God has advised on the Philosopher's Cafes, because I tried that program as well. If people don't just ask questions, people say what they think about the subject, and then somebody else develops on what that person has said. And not just sort of narrow it down to, well, I'm the expert, you can ask me questions. Other people have ideas and thoughts as well. And their thoughts and ideas are just as valid as mine, so they should be heard.
So this is seriously a proposal, and if anybody wants to jump in on that, we can even, exchange emails. And
yeah, can we do that with the theology on tap?
Yeah.
We only allow 1 pint though, because after 2 pints, nobody's making sense anymore.
In Greece, in school, we learned 2 things. At the time I was a small kid. We learned who are the men anthropos. In Greek language, anthropos, man. Anthropos make mistakes. It's no good and bad things. And they will teach us the anthropos must make anthropismo and Christianismo. Anthropismo, Christianismo go together in a hard way. Anthropos and Christianismos sometimes fight, okay? And anthropismos, Christianismos all time go together for the good, for the world, for the system, for everybody. Now you explain to us, to people, exactly anthropismos what to mean.
The human and Christianity.
Humanity.
Humanity and
You
Christianity.
can't anthropismos. If you do anthropismos, mean you never touch nobody. You never go do bad to nobody. And Christianism is the same thing. If you are believing in Jesus, you don't go steal, you don't go to, these two go together.
The other thing you learn in Greek schools is that Macedonia is really Greek. For true humanity, you have to merge the human concept, the human and Christianity. They have to be together for true humanity. That actually is talking Greek schools. Anyway, we probably talked long enough, but I think the idea of focusing on what it is to be human and what personhood actually is, that is significant. But I have a question, Alex. Who would you exclude from membership to the fellowship?
We've really excluded no one. We have a category that we call associate member for those who are not Orthodox.
Yeah.
But their rights and privileges are precisely like every other member. So.
Yeah, I'm always interested in who people would exclude.
Who would you exclude?
From anything.
No, who would you exclude from the OPF?
From the OPF?
Yeah.
I'm not too sure. I suppose somebody who's an active fascist or something.
Well, I actually have a thought that I
But I wouldn't exclude them from the meetings.
yeah.
Just for membership.
Are you an active fascist? Sorry. If
No.
you're an active fascist.
He's getting up to attack you. Getting ready to lunge.
I know he raised his hand like that. I was worried. Yeah, okay. No, thank you for being here. I'm sorry we went so long, but it was very nice that you came. Come see us again. Just drop by for cheese and
The reason we call it the Orthodox Peace Fellowship is so that there's a basis for discussion that's founded on an Orthodox.
No, look, okay, within the Orthodox world itself, people who are Orthodox, people theoretically, is there anybody,
Send me something about that.
any category?
We ask people to join who are Orthodox as full members.
I'm just asking. I don't even need an answer. I just want people to think about it for a little bit. Who's not good enough to be together with me?
Well, I think we would absolutely not do anything, it doesn't matter what aspect we're talking about.
No, I don't even want an answer to it. I just want people to think about it.
No, but I think it's actually something that we could answer because it is part of who we are and we're here and it's part of who we would be going forward. And we are actively talking about what we have to do to grow. And so that's actually a dynamic question.
Yeah.
We're absolutely never going to do anything that would take us away from being Orthodox,
Yeah.
but we would include anybody.
Orthodox Christians.
Yeah, we are
Well,
Orthodox
full
Christians.
membership.
We're an
Orthodox. It's an
We're an
Orthodox
Orthodox Peace Fellowship,
Fellowship.
and working backwards, we're a
Yeah.
fellowship,
Yeah.
first of all, and so we have to build that concept of fellowship.
Yeah.
We are oriented towards peace, and that means, simply and broadly, the peace of Christ. And we are Orthodox, because that's the well we drink from. We are children of the church. We seek to be formed in the church, not the other way around. And so that's not going to change. But in the true spirit and ethos of Orthodoxy, anybody can come in. We're not going to stop. That's my thought. We're not going to stop being Orthodox.
No,
Anybody's welcome.
I wouldn't even want to talk about a debate. I just want people to think about it.
Yeah.
Because, there's a...
Orthodoxy being
As you know, we used to have this radio program called The Shadow.
Oh, it's a great show. Great show.
What evil lurks in the hearts of men, the shadow.
Evil lurks in our hearts.
Yeah, evil lurks in all of our hearts. Everyone. Only the evil lurks in everyone.
Maybe that's where Solzhenitsyn comes.
Everyone of us. None of us are excused. Every one of us, we're always having a struggle between light. When in the creation, when Christ separates light from darkness, it doesn't stop there. It goes on throughout all of history. Christ is still separating light from darkness in the hearts of everyone who desires it. I mean, the cross itself is the dividing line between light and darkness. And on one side, on the right side, the thief found light, and the other stayed in darkness. So it's for us to, what makes us really human is allowing Christ to separate the light from the darkness within us. Now, the darkness doesn't go away, but we recognize it. We know what it is. And then we can struggle against it. That's part of what makes us true humans instead of just humans. You know. So, anyway, I guess
It is truly meet to call thee blessed, the Theotokos, ever blessed and most pure, and the Mother of our God, more honorable than the cherubim, and more glorious beyond compare than the seraphim. Without corruption now gavest birth to God the Word. True Theotokos, we magnify thee. Glory to Father, Son, and Holy Spirit, now and ever, and unto ages of ages. Amen. Lord have mercy, Lord have mercy, Lord have mercy. Vladika bless.
God is with us by His grace and love for mankind, always now and ever, and unto ages of ages.
Amen. Ispolaeti despota.
Anybody who has to leave can leave.